Welcome back to another episode of Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton. And on this episode, I kind of wanted to give people a little bit of a background on Mr. Robert Saleh, the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Of course, if you don't know that by now, you've been hiding under a rock. So, definitely is the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans. A lot of excitement from Titans fans, some Titans fans, and other Titans fans, a little bit of trepidation. So I figured let's find out a little bit more about his first head coaching stop, which was the New York Football Jets. I got those football Jets in there just to be, add a little pizzazz to it. Um, but yeah, his first head coaching job was with the New York Football Jets, and I brought in someone that has keen insight to him, and that would be Mr. Antwan Staley. Can you tell Antoine? Can you tell the people who you write for?
I've been a Jets writer for the Daily New York Daily News since 2002. I mean 2022 actually.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you would have a keen insight into the Robert Saleh era because you were there for pretty much all of his era. So
Yeah.
definitely wanted to kind of give Titans fans a little bit of a background into his first head coaching job. Of course, you weren't there in year one, but I know there was a lot of excitement, and I know that it was a lot of probably a different air in the building because Adam Gase, I'm sorry, was out of the building, or as some like to call him, old crazy eyes. He was out of the building, and Robert Salah was in there. He had Zach Wilson as a rookie. Things didn't necessarily go great, but hey, they finished 4-13. Optimism that hey, the next year things would get better, and enter you covering the New York Jets in year two. So, can you just describe the feeling of getting that assignment to cover the New York Jets in year two, and with just a feeling around the building when it comes to Robert Salah at that time?
I mean, back then it was a lot of optimism. Definitely, after the draft, they ended up drafting Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson in the first round, and also Brees Hall too as well. So you pair that up with a second-year quarterback, Zach Wilson at the time. Then for them, they thinking they have a good young team that could possibly contend, maybe for wild card spot maybe that particular year. And upcoming defense there, they made a lot of changes, especially considering with Robert Sala in his first year, where the roster was so bare. Like he even mentioned it, his first year, where he talked about how he didn't have necessarily the players that he wanted, because it wasn't a great roster when Adam Gase was the coach. Said they had a lot of turnover there. They finished 32nd in total defense there, and also points allowed. So yeah, they had a lot of work to do, and they improved from 32nd to they finished the top 5 unit defensively in 22. And really the rest of the time Salah was there, so he really turned around that defense quite in a hurry. There, it was just off obviously offensive issues there. Zach Wilson, struggling as well. In addition to just the quarterback carousel that he ended up dealing with, ended up benching Zach, and Mike White came about as well. So yeah, it was a lot of quarterback carousel there for Robert Saleh there. But I think one thing that that's beneficial to Titan fans, that you already have a quarterback in place where I think is really talented. You just really have to get people around him. So that was something that he kind of lacked there with the Jets throughout his tenure there, and that ultimately led to his demise.
Now, getting back to the quarterback carousel, you got Zach Wilson, you got a Joe Flacco, you had a Mike White, which I would say Bomani Jones calls him White Mike. He's been calling him that forever. But just getting
It's
to that
more than that
quarterback
too. We can
carousel.
go. We can go. It's way
Oh
more than
yeah,
that too. But we can.
oh yeah,
I don't want to necessarily bore everybody, but yeah, it was a lot. It was probably like
yeah.
7 quarterbacks, like within the span of 2 or 3 years.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. But just kind of want to stick to 2022 for the second for just this part of things. And it's the second year, and Zach Wilson injuries and just poor performance. He gets pulled. Mike White goes in. How much do you think that kind of maybe hurt Robert Salah in terms of that team and that development of that team when Zach Wilson couldn't quite, get things together and ultimately got benched?
Well, it's we got to provide context behind why he was benched too.
Mhm.
Like it was he was benched after the Patriots game. They ended up playing the Patriots, ended up losing at a last second walk off punt return. And Zach Wilson came into the locker room. He only had 78 yards. I think he was like 8 for 22 or something of that nature. He came into the
Mhm.
post game press conference basically had no accountability whatsoever for the loss, and the Jets were only able to score 3 points that entire day. So yeah, I think he really didn't. The locker room was actually in favor of benching Zach Wilson at that time, especially considering the lack of accountability that they had, in addition to his struggles there. Saleh really didn't have much choice but to really bench him at that point there. And after that, some of the players had Mike White T-shirts there. They were really in support of Mike White, being the starter there. The Jets were at the time, leading in November. They were 7-4 at one point in time in 22, and they ended up losing their last 6 games to end the year, and had an opportunity to make the playoffs. All you had to do was probably win 2 of those games, and they couldn't do that. And ultimately, again, like they ended up missing the playoffs, finished 7-10 there. And Mike White ended up getting hurt. He ended up breaking his ribs. So Zach ended up starting a couple more games after that. Chris Strebler is another quarterback that ended up getting some reps too
Mhm.
as well, in addition to Joe Flacco towards the end too as well. So yeah, and they were eventually eliminated against Seattle. But yeah, I mean, they Salah really didn't have much of a choice, but to bench
Mhm.
Zach at that time, because you're really trying to save the team there. And again, like you don't want to necessarily put him in that position where the players are giving up on you, especially considering what happened at that point in time.
Yeah, definitely was something he had to do. I knew I know I brought the right person on because I knew you were gonna give me context and definitely let us know all what happened there in that situation. But yeah, just the lack of development, lack of accountability was kind of, definitely something that didn't help along the way. And then of course, what was the feeling at the end of that season? It was like more of a missed opportunity, or were people starting to sour on Salah at that time, or was it just there? What was the feeling around that team?
Well, I mean, they went from 4 wins to 7, so it was just kind of like it was unfulfilled, I guess you could say, because again, they had an opportunity to make the playoffs, being at 7-4 at one point in time. I don't think it was heat on him per se at that point, but obviously it was they know they needed to address the quarterback situation. The defense had improved there. It seemed like everything around the Jets outside of, just the quarterback position had improved at that point in time. So yeah, other than the offensive line, which is kind of a little bit, up and down at the moment. But yeah, I mean, they knew they had to prove the quarterback position. They ended up targeting a few guys there. Derek Carr obviously is a name that they ended up looking at early, but ultimately they fell in love with Aaron Rodgers, especially after signing Nathaniel Hackett to be their offensive coordinator. That pretty much signaled that they were going after Aaron Rodgers and going into that sweepstakes.
All right, so I kind of want to dive into that one because that was kind of an area I wanted to go into. Robert Saleh year three. And that's when you bring Aaron Rodgers in, you fire Matt LaFleur, who he brought over from San Francisco with him to be the offensive coordinator. Um, Kind of just I know you brought Nathaniel Hackett in, but do I just wondered, was that a Nathaniel Hackett pickup Robert Salah actually wanting him to come in, or was that more upper management wanting him to bring that Hackett in pursuit of Aaron Rodgers?
No, it was his decision. It wasn't nothing that Woody
Mhm.
Johnson and Joe Douglas at the time, the general manager, had said. But I think when you're trying to convince somebody to come over and make that want to be traded there, then that's the one thing that kind of appeases them to they're going to run the same offense that he's been used to running for decades at that point. So yeah, it had nothing to do with upper manager or anything. It was more or less Robert Saleh just trying to say, you know what, let's go get Aaron Rodgers. Like we know who his offensive coordinator wants to be there. They said they went to go meet him in Malibu at his home. So they talked about some of the
Mhm.
things that kind of the concessions that he needed there, whether you want to believe it was a list or whatever the case may be. But they talked about what would make him comfortable. That was one of the things that made him comfortable.
Got you, got you. Yeah, all that time I kind of thought it was more the other way around, but hey, I stand corrected and I was wrong. So, going into year three, of course, the excitement is around. Aaron Rodgers is in town. He's got Alan Lazard that he brought over from Green Bay to be one of his receivers. He's got Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator. Goes out the first game, all the hype, first play, tears his Achilles, done for the season. Can you kind of explain just how the feeling was around that team when that moment happened, and just the feeling in the locker room, and just how it carried over throughout that season?
I can't remember much about that night other than just working the entire time. So I don't know. I'm sure players were shocked, like everybody was. I think everybody was just kind of like, 4 plays in, it just boom, it happens. And then obviously, he's out for the year. So I just think everybody was surprised there. They thought coming into the year that they had championship aspirations. They had a top flight defense there. They finished fifth in the league there in total defense and everything like that. And to have that happen, just pretty much let the air out of the balloon, really, in MetLife Stadium and just in general for the organization. So they were basically back to where they were before with Zach Wilson, just playing mediocre football and basically had the same record that they had the year before at 7-10.
And as far as that, with them having the same record, 7-10, I'm pretty sure the Heat probably turned up just a little bit on Robert Salah at that point in time.
Yeah, I asked them point blank, were you worried for they lost to the Raiders on Sunday night in late November, and I'd asked him, was he worried about his job? And he said no. And I asked him why, and he didn't give me a response. But at that point, we would later find out that Woody Johnson, the owner, gave him assurance that he would be back for year 4. So that's why he wasn't worried about his job. Like everybody else that was speculating he might get fired, but behind the scenes, they had already given him assurance that he would be back because of the Aaron Rodgers injury. Really gave him a mulligan. Like that's basically what it was. Like
Mhm.
after that, you know, your top quarterback goes out, future Hall of Famer. Okay, we'll give you another year just to see if we can make it work. So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and as far as just of course, Aaron Rodgers is out, but the defense still did great. Did some things, it's a Sauce Gardner. You got a Quentin Williams over there, Jermaine Johnson. I mean, was there any rumblings of frustration from that side of the ball during that time, or was just they were, trying to get things done and focus on the task at hand?
I mean, players just, you focus on what you can control, but I'm sure, it's been frustrating. Like it was during that whole tenure because, you had a really good defense that was doing their part. I won't say great defense, but you had a really good defense that was doing their part in games there. You wasn't losing games because of the unit for the most part. Um, and the offense was just kind of struggling. It'd be weeks where, the Jets might score 10 points or 13 or whatever the case may be. And it's hard to win in the NFL that way when you're scoring that few amount of points. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure players were frustrated. They didn't necessarily let that out vocally, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely a level of frustration behind the scenes with some players.
Got you. So, and speaking of level of frustration, I know, of course, the talk was all about Aaron Rodgers and Robert Salah and their issues, I guess, with each other. That's what was talked about media wise in terms of outside of New York. But in year 3, did you kind of observe any tension between any of those guys or anything like that during that time?
I mean, Aaron was away from because he was rehabbing, so he wasn't necessarily
Mhm.
there always at the facility. So, yeah, it really
Yeah.
wasn't. He really didn't. This talk didn't really come about until Salah's last year, where Aaron had played there. It was kind of a push. I mean, it was the Thursday night game. It was kind of a little bit of push between him and Aaron there. But yeah, year 3, like Aaron was hardly there, really. I mean, he traveled with the team a little bit, but he wasn't always at the facility, obviously, trained like rehabbing that injury. But yeah, in 24, I think, it became more of a talking point about their relationship.
Got you, got you. So of course, going into 24, which is year 4 of Robert Salah, and of course, that was not necessarily the best time for Mr. Robert Salah there. He gets fired after 2-3 start to the season. People talking about the offense and all those different things there. And did it seem like, I get a question, did it seem like he kind of lost the team at that point in time? Or was it just, you know, the move they felt they needed to make in terms of the Jets organization?
When Woody Johnson fired him, he basically said, "This is a championship roster," and they had made all these moves for Aaron Rodgers, and just
Mhm.
the team in general there. Hassan Reddick had been signed to as well, been traded and then signed to a new deal eventually. And, they did Devontae Adams would later join too as well. So, yeah, they did all this stuff just trying to appease there, and then it just didn't work. It had nothing to do, the players didn't want this at all. Like the players were completely surprised when Saleh got fired. It's just a matter of Woody Johnson just feeling like the team had underachieved there. They wasn't. It was his fourth year, and it was just time for a change there. He felt like he wanted to make the change before the season got away from him, especially after that loss in London against the Vikings, which really did him in 2 days later.
Yeah, just you said the players weren't in favor of. Now, I would say the players saw all these things going on and these people being added and all these things to seemingly appease Aaron Rodgers. How do you think Robert Saleh kind of felt about any of that? Did it kind of seem like he was a little bit more on edge to start the season as opposed to previous seasons?
No, not really. I think they thought they were going to be better than what they were, and I think you kind of go back to 23 too as well, and it just goes back to you can put a lot of individuals together. That don't necessarily mean you're a good team. Like, yeah, you have,
Mhm.
Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Famer, Devontae Adams, future Hall of Famer at the time, CJ Mosley, really good player too as well. Hassan Reddick at that point was kind of a double digit sack guy, consistently in the league there. So they had really good team, especially with the young team with Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, Brees Hall too as well. And uh just chemistry wise, it just didn't work. And then obviously Aaron, he didn't look like his old self. I mean, he looked like a guy that was, 41, 42 coming off an Achilles injury. And that's exactly what it was. I mean, so it was obviously going to take him some time to just kind of get his legs back under him. But at the end of the day, like Woody Johnson didn't have that patience to be able to wait it all out. I don't know if the results would have been different. I still think Robert Saleh probably would have been fired just simply because I just didn't think the Jets were a great team. And I
Mhm.
think, they probably would have won more than 5 games. They probably would have won 7 or 8, but that still wasn't going to get you in the playoffs. And the end result probably would have remained the same at the end of the year.
Gotcha. And again, the tension, like you mentioned, the tension rising between Robert Salah and Aaron Rodgers. Can you just describe kind of what the feeling was like? I guess in the locker room, necessarily with the tension between those two guys. Was it kind of
Well,
felt, or
Well, nah, like people just downplayed it. Like it was never
Mhm.
like a big talking point among any players other than the media. That was really the main thing. But people
Mhm.
just downplayed the whole thing there. I think Solid said I forgot exactly what he said. He said to Aaron there, but both of them completely downplayed it when asked about it there. I think Aaron just kind of said it was something heat of the moment or whatever. So uh you take whatever, you take it with a grain of salt there. I'm sure it was kind of more than what they're making it out to be, but obviously, that wasn't necessarily enough tension to kind of break up the team there. Although eventually that would be the case, but not because of that reason, obviously.
Yeah, definitely wasn't the ending that Robert Salah wanted in his first NFL head coaching job. But kind of speaking to Titans fans now, what would you kind of say they could look forward to in terms of just a Robert Salah led team?
Well, I think it's kind of like it's got to be similar to how Mike Braver was with the Titans too, as well. A players coach there, somebody that a leader of men, somebody that's passionate that you see on the sideline too, as well. With the Jets, he always didn't exhibit that for whatever reason. There, I mean, some people kind of talked about that, but you definitely see that with the 49ers, where he's consistently in it, like just showing his passion on the sideline after a great play or something bad happens. Also, showed his passion in that way too. I think one thing that might help him this time, as opposed to last time when he was with the Jets, he's going to call plays with Tennessee. He didn't call plays with the Jets. Jeff Albrecht was the defensive coordinator. He kind of Saleh was kind of trying to be a little bit of the CEO type of thing there, but now he wants to keep that flow of calling plays too, and I think it might be a good thing for him that way he can just kind of exhibit that passion and get this defense, which I think the Titans have some talented players on the defense, get them playing at a much higher level than what they have been.
All right, and of course, you mentioned about him making the defensive calls and things like that. What else do you think do you hope he learned from his Jets experience?
Well, he better learn about the his team being more disciplined than what he was with the Jets because penalties were a big issue when he was there. Like the Jets consistently were one of the worst, mostly penalized teams in the league. There, it was something that Aaron Glenn wanted to clean up when he took over for Saleh this upcoming in 2025. So, and that was one of the few things the Jets did do really well under Aaron Glenn was kind of clean up the penalties there. They didn't do a whole lot much to that, but you know, but yeah, that was always the team seemed like they just made committed penalties at the worst time possible. So I think it's one thing that he has to clean up is definitely being more of a disciplined team. You can be aggressive, but just do it very smartly. Don't be stupid about it, which is something that I feel like Jets, at times the Jets were doing, just making boneheaded mistakes.
Well, I got to ask you something about Aaron Glenn, and it has nothing to do with him coaching. It has to do with the strut on the sideline, man. When that return happened, and he's going up the sideline, and then he gets a little dance in. Man, do you remember seeing that when
I
that
was in
happened?
Tampa, so yeah, I remember seeing it pretty well when it happened. Like that was the highlight of the season. Like they ended up losing that game, by the way, too. So yeah,
Man, I mean, I honestly I still see that clip of somebody playing a song along it while he's dancing
yeah,
on the song.
yeah. Jenna
Man,
Lake or ESPN, like she put the Earth, Wind and Fire track September over it, and it just kind of took a life of its own.
mhm. Man, I've heard a few other songs behind it too,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's just like,
It's
man,
Instagram, all that stuff too. But yeah, that's when she put the song behind it, it was kind of like, wow, okay.
yeah, that definitely look, every time I need a chuckle or a laugh, I turn that on, man. That is instant just laughter coming.
Yeah,
But
we asked him about it, and he
you
basically
did.
said like, yeah, he was gonna be him. Like he felt like in the moment
Mhm.
that's just what he wanted to do. I guess he celebrated a little bit too early because Tampa ended up getting the ball back and kicking the game winning field goal. But at the time, it seemed like they were gonna win that game, but it was still 100.
Mhm.
It was 1 minute and 49 seconds left, so way too much time.
Right, right. And I just have to ask you as well. You mentioned Cam Ward and coming in with a better quarterback, franchise quarterback. Um, just objectively speaking, since
Yeah.
you don't cover the Titans, but what did you like what you saw from him, or like what you saw in some bits and pieces that you saw from Cam Ward in his rookie year?
Yeah, I mean, he made some mistakes there. I mean, obviously, kind of rookie type things, but I like what
Hmm.
I saw. I kind of saw like a leader, on and off the field at times, saying things that want to get people behind him. It seems I feel like his game is exactly probably what I thought would translate to the NFL. Just has a really good arm there, can move out the pocket, has a displays some good accuracy too as well. I've seen the guy. I've been high on Cam Ward since he was at Washington State. So since there, and then
Hmm.
of course transferring to Miami, and then getting drafted by the Titans there. I just don't think it's a lot around him. Like you got to be able to get some talent around him there, get him some support, and then when you're able to do that, and if I think the Titans they have a ton of money to spend. I think they have $90 million to spend this off season.
They'll have
So
100 million. They'll have 100 million, I believe, eventually.
so 100 mil, like yeah, you got it. That's a lot of money to be able to get him, some help, especially at the wide receiver position there. If you can do that, and especially in the South, where I feel like yeah, the Jaguars are really good there, but I feel like it's an
Mhm.
opportunity to possibly, take that next step and show that you can contend, with the Texans there, who's having some CJ Strauss also having some issues at the quarterback position
He
right now
got the
too. So
yips real bad.
exactly. They have a great defense. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity for them to kind of go from where they were this year to maybe a, 7, 8 win team. And I think, just keep climbing that ladder. If they can go to 7, 8 wins in Salah's first year, I think Titan fans would take that, especially going into the new stadium in 27.
Yeah, definitely. And also, just to throw something out there, he did have a couple young guys that I think are going to grow with him offensively. And Gunnar Helm at tight end, Alec Manor at one wide receiver spot, and Chim DK at the other one. Which Chim DK was a All Pro, albeit as a returner.
Yeah.
But definitely some young pieces. I think they just need that one guy, that one number one guy to kind of set all of them in place where they actually would be. Of course, running back position, people have talked about Tony Pollard and should he be back or not, and things like that. We know Spears it can be a playmaker when getting the ball in space. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't think the Titans are as far off as people think they are. I kind of have a look at them, and I look at them and I see a little bit of Patriots in this. And basically, I see 2024 Patriots a little bit, just
If they
because
can
of
hit
course
on
you
it,
had a
yeah,
franchise quarterback. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, they can hit on those picks, yeah, definitely. Because the
right,
Patriots hit on
right.
like all in free agency and picks, like they just hit on just about all
hmm
of it.
and that's actually what Mike Berganzi did a lot in this draft. I mean, you hit on all three fourth round picks. You hit on pretty much about every pick you made. They actually contributed. Marcus Harris was a seventh round pick at cornerback, came in and did a solid job as well. So, I mean, give you one more draft. You hit on your picks. I mean, you could have a turnaround in that level. And the funny part is, I mean, it's almost the situations are literally almost very eerily alike because they both needed a pass rusher. They both needed corners. Well, I will say this: they are missing. They didn't have a Christian Gonzalez, so that isn't
Yeah.
the same. But they also, of course, had young wide receivers. They had Pops Douglas. They had Pop Douglas and Butte up there, and the Titans have DK and Iomatter down here. So it's kind of a lot of little similarities there to the 2024 Patriots team, kind of loosely looking.
I think it's also a really good wide receiver draft. I think you may not have
Mhm,
a upper echelon like you have one guy and like Tate. I think Ohio State is really good, but outside that, I think
mhm,
you have a lot of guys that could be really good, like either lower level ones or like really good twos that also can really help you too in this draft too. So you can really get those guys as well. So yeah, I think
mhm,
it's not a top. Everybody wants to talk about the quarterbacks, and that's always sexy to a lot of people. But I also think it's a
mhm,
good meat and potatoes draft. Like the D line and offensive line is really good, and then I think you have really good wide receivers and linebackers too. That's going to be up in April. So yeah, you have an opportunity to if you can hit on a lot of your picks. I don't know if they're going to win 13, 14 games like the Patriots did, but I do think they can, make that turn that corner and be, a really good team that I think a lot of look at Jacksonville. Like I don't think a lot of people saw
mhm,
that coming either. I thought they'd win the division, but I didn't think they look as good as what they did either. So yeah,
mhm.
if you can make that turn, head on your pits, then yeah, I think you could be a force in the South sooner rather than later, especially under Saleh, because he's going to get that defense straightened out at least, if not year one, and definitely year two.
Definitely, definitely. Well, Antwan Staley, I thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for giving us an insight into Robert Saleh's years as the head coach of the New York Football Jets. If you can, tell everyone where they can find you on social media and of course where they can find your writings as well.
Just Antwan Staley. All social media platforms is pretty easy. You can find me also at New York Daily News at nydailynews.com.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I thank you for your time. Of course, I'm Mike Patton, host of Touring the AFC South. You can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter at Mike Patton82. That's MikePaton 82. You can also find me on Instagram and threads at that's THA, not THE underscore general underscore MP. Touring the AFC South, you can find on all listening platforms, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it, we are there. I am also putting this podcast, or it is on the Mike Patton Network on YouTube. I thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Touring the AFC South. We're out. Peace.